Welcome back, everybody, to Dead Air. Thank you so much for joining me again this week. So last week, we kind of got into it with the possession, and now we're going into a new theme here, people. We're getting into Mother's Day, and yes, horror loves Mother's Day, and Mother's Day hates to see horror coming. So, if you're new here, my name is Siena Anzaldua, your expert on all things spooky, scary, movie-related, Central Valley-related. It all comes together perfectly. So, yes, today we are talking about Los Que Vuelven, or The Return, from 2019. Now, this is an Argentinian film. Last week I said it was our first foreign film. It's not.
Liar!
It's our second. The first one was Raw, horrifying as well. And this one is gonna be a different take on horror. And I quite enjoyed this one. It was very different than what I'm used to. So this should make an interesting conversation. If you haven't already, go ahead and go watch Los Que Vuelven. It's on Tubi. We love Tubi. And, you know, enjoy. This is gonna be Mother's Day is going to be a couple of our episodes, so I'm pretty excited about it. And buckle up, people. So let's just do a quick little summary for us. In 1919 South America, a woman is desperate for a child after suffering through multiple miscarriages. With the help of her servant, she'll pray to a mythical deity to resurrect her stillborn son. The plan works, but the child comes something else. Something evil. So after that little summary, we now have... Hold.
Fans are going for more right now. Should we? Our low mile.
Siena's thoughts. We've got Siena's thoughts. Whether you like them or not, we've got Siena's thoughts. Yes. So, I really enjoyed this movie. This one, I think personally is a little bit of a slow burn horror movie. And I would almost say this is a horror thriller type of movie. Not just necessarily a horror movie. So when I talk about a horror thriller, the horror thriller is more focused on the storyline, more focused on building that tension within the movie, rather than solely focusing on the horror of the movie. The horror! The horror! So these two kind of interact and coincide with each other and really make something that is very tension-inducing, very scary on a whole different type of level. So I think this movie does that very well. I think this movie is a little bit slower to the horror aspect of it, really builds the atmosphere around us. I like the fact that this is a period piece. And so this is 1919 South America. You got some information about a deity that the mother is trying to contact, Iguazu. And this is the mother of the day and the night. And so that is really interesting to me. I like the fact that, again, just like last week with The Possession, we're getting another culture within this movie, another look to see how exactly Argentinians may see having a loved one come back or having loved ones come back, and that desperation. And ultimately, one of the big themes for the next couple of weeks, motherhood, and how we portray motherhood within this movie. So I think this is really interesting. I think that a lot of the characters are interesting as well, because you get this sort of detached father, and it goes more into detail as you watch this movie, just how detached he is from his son and his wife. And let me tell you, it's a little scandalous at parts. So, warning on that. But I think it is, again, it just shows and is so interesting to see motherhood, relationships, how people care for each other through a different cultural lens. And you can see that within this movie. And that's one of the biggest things that I enjoyed. I think another aspect is the fact that this movie heavily relied on the atmosphere and the atmosphere it built. And I think that's a great thing. I think that the fact that it built up this really creepy and secluded feeling within this movie is very powerful in a way, because you get the darkness, you get the isolation of the jungle, feeling like there's not really anybody there with this family, even though you see multiple people visiting, saying hi, that kind of thing. It still feels lonely somehow. And that is the power of using a great atmosphere, using a great set, and finding what exactly would work for this type of horror movie. And I think they did an excellent job with that. I think that was so important within this movie, is that building of that atmosphere, that horror, not necessarily horror, actually, I don't think that's the correct word, the dread within this movie. I think that is it's really powerful in a way that I think gore can lack sometimes. So I think another aspect of this movie that I think is really cool and it's really great and it's really important is that this movie does not rely on gore, it relies on the atmosphere, but you do get gore at the very end. And oh my gosh. One thing that I feel like a lot of foreign horror films really are very strong at is the fact that when they go gory, they really go gory. It's very gory. And so I think that sometimes a lot of American films kind of shy away from being too gory. And this film was not shy at all. Now, it doesn't rely on the gore at all. But when it wants to show you gore, it's going to show you gore. And boy, does it show. I mean, there's a part, there's not a lot of scenes with gore in this movie, but the gore is so powerful and it's so raunchy, it affects you so heavily because it's so personal, it's so intimate type of gore. And when you watch this movie, you'll understand what I'm saying, because, I mean, there's points in the movie where the husband takes the woman and slits her throat. But he doesn't just slit her throat, he cuts her head off completely with a machete. There's another one where he bashes one of the return's head in, and you see every part of that. And it's not just like from far away where you can kind of like, you have to kind of assume some of the details. No, absolutely not. You are like, it feels like you are feet away, a couple of feet away from it happening. Like if you turned around, he would do it to you as well. And that is so scary and so horrifying. And I loved that. At the center of this film really is a mother who is devastated by her loss. Her desperation is what really drives this story to continue. And this film, at the center of it, asks the brutal question of how far would you go to reverse death? And that is really incredibly interesting in a film, in a horror film. And so this movie really explores how grief can override your reason and that kind of thing. And so that to me is so interesting and is so important to touch on, especially when it comes to motherhood and Mother's Day. So I think one of the most important themes in this movie is that
why are you smiling?
Horror has this tendency to find what society finds horrifying and just put it at the forefront. And this movie really takes that fear of death, that fear of dying, of someone we love who dies, and showing us that, yes, you could try to bring someone back, but there's always going to be a cost to it. And boy, is there a cost. Okay, so this movie treats death as something that is very powerful and very final. And when you try to undo it, it disrupts the natural order. So this is very classic in horror movies. And so, like, again, we've seen this throughout a lot of different movies. Final Destination, Candyman, all that kind of stuff. And so when humans really try to control life and death, when you try to bring somebody back, something darker always comes back with them. Another movie that I feel like really hits on this is Shudder, too. It's another foreign horror film. Love it. Great movie. And so I think that this is such an interesting theme within this movie and something that brings this to such the forefront. I think another very interesting theme that we get here is colonialism and class oppression in this movie. This is 1919, so it's set in a rural estate environment. The film highlights the power imbalances between the wealthy landowners and indigenous local communities. And the privileged characters often exploit others while assuming control over land, labor, and belief systems. And this horror, of course, is tied to historical violence. And I think this is something that is heavily used in horror because it's another layer within a film, another layer within real life that makes it truly horrifying. And I think that is so incredibly interesting and important to see when we are watching horror movies, is these underlying themes that we see that we can also tie back to real life. And I think that is really cool about horror. And one of the things that I truly love about horror is that we can take these real life societal these real life societal fears and bring them to the forefront and talk about them in such a way that feels a little bit safer, ironically, and a little bit more comforting, ironically, again. And so another aspect that really plays on this is indigenous knowledge versus the elite arrogance. So the traditional spiritual practices and local wisdom are dismissed until they actually become useful. And this film critiques the way dominant classes ignore or exploit indigenous culture while still benefiting from it. And there's this strong theme of you have to respect the forces that you don't understand. And this is why I don't with, Ouija boards and stuff, because that's freaking scary, okay? I won't ever have a real Ouija board in my home. Now, will I have like a prop? I do have a cutting board that has a Ouija board on it. That's fine. I'll never put a planchette next to it. I'm gonna be honest here. But I think that like understanding and really respecting not just cultures, but the deities, the different belief systems that a culture believes is very important. And I think this is a very interesting aspect of horror to touch on within this movie. And it's touched on in a lot of different movies that I really enjoy. Again, it's a theme of mine that I really love. So one of the last and biggest themes in this movie that I wanted to touch on is motherhood as a loving type of feeling, and also terror. It's scary to be a mom or to become a mom. So the maternal instinct in this movie is really portrayed as both beautiful and dangerous. Love becomes obsession and protection becomes possession. And the nurturing in this movie also becomes destructive. So this film asks whether unconditional love can be harmful sometimes. And that is something for y'all to determine. And I am sure that unconditional love has a boundary where it can become harmful. And this movie is a great example of that and can be seen very clearly with that. And so I think that's very interesting and something that is just really wonderfully touched upon in horror and in this movie. And so I think that is going to be a theme that we see a lot in the next couple weeks leading up to Mother's Day, is the horror of being a mother and the pure terror that women feel when they become a mother. Now we have Siena's Music Mayhem segment. Siena's Music Mayhem segment. Siena's Music Mayhem segment. So, in Los Que Vuelven, the score really is one of the film's most important elements, okay? It doesn't necessarily lean on traditional melody, and rather it leans on mood, dread, and that spiritual unease. And so the score composer is Leonardo Martinelli, is really interesting because there isn't necessarily a big overarching theme type of soundtrack. It's more of the sounds that it uses. So it's using the low drones, the ambient textures to really create that constant tension. It's also using the percussive pulses that feel ritualistic and primal. And we're also hearing whispers, hums, and sort of the natural sounds that are blending together and that make you question whether you're actually hearing music or you're just hearing the jungle around them. So then you're also hearing the sparse piano and string touches during the very grief-heavy moments. And you also get the sudden bursts of dissonance when the supernatural enters. The score really tries to make you feel unsafe. And that to me is so powerful within a horror movie. And so you get when you see the motherhood and the grief on screen, the music sort of becomes quieter and more mournful, and you hear the restrained instrumentation, often with the space between notes, and it reflects that emptiness, that loss, and that emotional exhaustion that one can feel. So then when you get to the jungle piece of it, the story, when the story moves towards that indigenous spirituality, the land itself, the music becomes more organic and more atmospheric, and the rhythmic textures and eerie vocal layers really make nature feel ancient and feel alive. And that to me is so incredibly powerful. And the fact that this movie uses this type of score amplifies that horror within it. So then you get
had dreams that you want him to do you so much you could do anything.
So then when you see that resurrection aspect, that supernatural horror piece within the movie, this is where the score gets discordant, warped, and the rising tension cues create a sense that something unnatural has crossed over into our world, again amplifying that horror. And then with the colonial violence and the social tension, the film critiques the class and colonial power structures, and the music mirrors that and supports it with heavy, oppressive sound design. And instead of heroic themes, it feels suffocating and unstable. This is really what makes it effective, is because the score never tells you how to feel. It shows you, it guides you, and you can feel it in your heart, in your gut, that gut-wrenching feeling, that really uncomfortable uneasiness. And it lands because the music feels like it's coming from the earth. It's a natural presence, a horrific natural presence. So actually what's interesting is if you really liked the score of this movie, some other scores that you'd like is The Witch, which is a little bit more folky, more horror strings type of feeling. You'd like Tigers Are Not Afraid, which is more grief and supernatural emotion. You'd like Hereditary, which is dread heavy and more psychological. And you'd like November, which is another eerie folklore type of atmosphere. And of course, now we have Siena's fun facts. They're fun and they're facts, and you learn a little something. Siena's fun facts. So, fun fact number 1. This movie was filmed in the real jungle, okay.
Do it! Just do it! Don't just do it! Don't just do it! So just do it! Your dreams just come true!
This movie was filmed in the real jungles of Misiones Province, Argentina. So the movie was shot in Misiones Province, a lush subtropical region famous for dense rainforest and the Iguazu area. So all the sounds you're hearing, the humidity, the insects, the mud, everything like that is actually real. That wasn't sound staged. It wasn't staged like that. Fun fact number 2. The natural environment was another character on set. That was intentional. So critics repeatedly praised the film's visuals and the way the forest feels alive and threatening. And Leonardo Hermo and the crew used the actual landscape to create dread instead of relying heavily on CGI or studio effects. Fun fact number 3. The film uses both Spanish and Guarani languages. So the production incorporates Guarani, indigenous language spoken in the region. That's which is really interesting because I feel like that really adds to the authenticity of the movie and the film, and it gives it just another layer of that authenticness and that power. Fun fact number 4. It was based on director Laura Casabe's earlier short film. So the return grew out of Casabe's 2010 short film La Vuelta del Malón. So this feature was essentially the expansion of ideas she'd already developed over the years. So this meant that really the set benefited from a director who already knew the tone and the mythology she wanted. There was already that preconceived idea, which again makes it so powerful. Fun fact number 5. It premiered at the Mar del Plata International Film Festival. So before wider release, the movie had its world premiere at the Mar del Plata International Film Festival in November 2019, Argentina's most prestigious film festival. So the cast and crew got to debut their creepy jungle nightmare here, which is amazing. I love that. I love hearing about these different film festivals and such that that are all over the world, and to hear and see that horror is not just prevalent in the United States, but everywhere in the world. And fun fact number 6. Because it's a period horror film set in 1919, the wardrobe department had to deal with corsets, formal clothing, and historical styling in jungle weather. So that sounds horrific in itself because I don't like heat. Ironically, even though I live in Fresno, I don't like the heat, and that sounds horrific. And of course, we now have Scarometer. That meters as you get scared. Scarometer. That meters as you get scared. Yes, we have Scarometer. And honestly, I think I'd give this movie
2 hours later.
an 8.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed this movie. I think it was strong. I think it's a great take on motherhood, on how far would you go for your loved ones. And I thought it was a great movie, and I think it is a must-watch for everybody. Well, thank you folks so much for joining me again tonight. I hope that you were as horrified as I was watching this film. If you ever have any thoughts, questions, if you have a movie recommendation you'd like to see on my show, please interact with me on my Instagram, on my YouTube, on my TikTok, all the social medias. And we're going to keep this motherhood theme going with Rosemary's Baby next week. And believe me, this is probably one of my favorite movies. So I can't wait to go through it. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. And remember, don't split up and don't go into the basement. Bye.